I'm sure you're aware of the iconic red explosive barrels common throughout the game Half-Life 2. But have you ever asked yourself this deep philosophical question? Which level in Half-Life 2 has the most explosive barrels in it? Which level has the least? And what's the average barrel count per level? Well, today I'm going to answer those extremely deep and complex questions, and more! So strap yourself in, because the answers might be shocking and unsettling. Now surely if you've played Half-Life 2, you know about the Barrel Room. Located in the level D1 Canals 03, the Barrel Room is a room which contains barrels and manhacks in great quantities. Most players would assume that this would be the level with the most explosive barrels in Half-Life 2. And if you thought that, you would be absolutely and completely wrong! This is actually the level with the second most amount of barrels in Half-Life 2, coming in at a whopping 36 barrels. The level with the most number of explosive barrels is D1 Canals 01A, which is the level in which the Metro Police are constantly raining down these barrels on you from the walls of the canal. In that level, there's a massive total of 46 explosive barrels. The level before this one, D1 Canals 01, is actually the first level in Half-Life 2 that contains explosive barrels. This barrel right here is the first ever explosive barrel you can interact with in the entire game. But there are only 16 barrels in this map, putting it in the number 5 slot for most barrels in a level. Okay, that's cool and all, but I'm sure you barrel haters are wondering what map has the least amount of barrels. Well, of the 68 maps in Half-Life 2, 36 maps do not have a single explosive barrel at all. That is over 50% of the entire game being played with no barrels. So next time a barrel hater comes all up in your face with their anti-barrel propaganda saying there's too many barrels in Half-Life 2, you can hit them back with these facts and logic. Now when it comes to levels that do have barrels, the least amount spot is actually tied between two maps, D1 Canals 05 and D2 Coast 09, each containing only a single barrel. Now one could argue that D1 Train Station 06 actually has the least, because it has a single hidden barrel in the map file, but I'm not counting hidden barrels in this video. However, if you're interested in hidden Half-Life 2 barrels, stay tuned for next week's video, where I will exclusively discuss the secret explosive barrels of Half-Life 2. So what's the average barrel count per level of Half-Life 2? Well, if we take all 68 total levels into consideration, the average Half-Life 2 level has about 5 barrels per level. But wait, that isn't fair, because more than half of the levels don't have any barrels at all. So, if I exclude those disgusting barrel-less levels, I can find the average barrel count for levels which contain barrels, which would be exactly 10.5, a perfect number. The math is easy when you know how many total barrels there are in Half-Life 2. There are 336 barrels in Half-Life 2 across all levels, but one is not able to be destroyed. The number 336 is actually a deep cut reference to another popular game series that came out around the same time as Half-Life 2. You see, if you subtract the 2 from Half-Life 2 from each number in the total number of barrels, 3, 3, and 6, you end up with the numbers 1, 1, 4. This is actually an intentional reference by Valve to the game series Halo 3, whose main character, John Halo, is actually known as John 114. I know, crazy, right? But do you know what's even crazier? The distribution of the explosive barrels across each level in Half-Life 2. Look at this graph. This shows the number of barrels in each level throughout the game, arranged in the order that you play them in. Notice how the majority of barrels are in the first half of the game. You can clearly see a downward trend in the number of barrels per level as the game progresses. It makes sense that early on, they want to have a lot of barrels to teach the player how to use the gameplay mechanics of them, but for the later sections of the game, you're hardly interacting with any barrels at all. You can also clearly see how, even in the main section of barrel gaming, there are consistent barrel breaks, because even though I'm sure the only people still watching this are true barrel heads like myself, who would never get tired of some explosive barrel action no matter what game it's in, most gamers are not as strong as us. They are weak-minded and don't have girlfriends, so they need regular breaks from barrels or they will get bored. Another obvious result you can observe from this data is the complete lack of barrels in certain sections of the game, specifically the very beginning, the very end, Nova Prospect, and the Combine Nexus. What do these areas all have in common? Cutscenes, maybe, but in reality, the real commonality is the rebel forces. Alex, Barney, Kleiner, Eli, you never see them interacting with explosive barrels at any time in Half-Life 2. They hate barrels. And do you know why? Well, it's because something else we can glean from this data. The explosive oil barrels are actually Combine technology. Technology that they use exclusively to decontaminate and destroy things in remote locations where they can't get their larger equipment set up quickly. Remember, these guys control the entire supply of oil on Earth, and there's not likely that many things using up that oil anymore. So it is very obvious that the explosive Half-Life 2 barrels were made by the Combine. This is also why you never see these barrels in areas that the Combine already fully controls. The good parts of City 17, where the citizens live like it's 1984, but is still relatively civilized, are completely free of these barrels. The lavish interiors of the Combine Nexus and the Citadel are also barrel-free. Only the run-down areas of Nova Prospect contain explosive barrels, and these areas probably are not even used by the Combine. The actual Combine prison levels have next to no barrels in them. The Combine don't actually need the barrels when they're close enough to proper Combine equipment, but when they're out in the wild, away from their supply chains, they rely on this simple and readily available explosive barrel technology. The barrels are very likely multi-use as well. Not only do the Combine use them to remove the rebels living in the canals, they also probably use them to fuel the very vehicles used to deliver the explosive barrels. You see Metro cops regularly using normal civilian trucks to dump these barrels onto Gordon and other rebels. It all makes perfect sense, and I'm sure your mind is completely blown like an explosive barrel right now. But that's why the rebels hate explosive barrels. They know they are Combine creations used to kill countless numbers of their own people, as well as decontaminate other areas. To further back this up, you don't see a single explosive barrel in all of Eli's lab. You only ever see explosive barrels in the run-down, mostly uninhabited areas of the game. Places that the rebels don't live in, and places that the Combine don't have significant presence in, but are active in. Even Valve clearly planned this all into the lore of the game. Remember the hidden barrel I mentioned earlier in D1 Train Station 06? Well, if Valve left that oil barrel in the game, then it would have been located far too close to a civilian-occupied area of City 17 for it to make sense within the barrel lore. This is why Valve removed that specific barrel, and why you only see the first barrel later on in a more run-down, unoccupied area of the city, where normal people wouldn't ever be. To finish up this video, here are some quick facts about Half-Life 2's explosive oil barrels that you may not have known. Did you know one side of the explosive barrel appears to say "flammable" instead of "flammable"? There's also a note written in cursive attached to the upper part of the barrel. There's a letter X printed on the bottom of the explosive barrel, near a number 0, and the remnants of what looks like could have been a 4 or a 1, and a 2. These kinds of thoughtful details are almost never replicated in the soulless HD remakes of the Half-Life 2 explosive barrel. The explosive barrel is based off of a real-life, closed-head, 55-gallon steel drum. In Half-Life 2, the barrel is almost exactly as tall as its real-life counterpart. However, it is about 1.25 inches smaller in diameter. In real life, just the empty barrels alone, without anything inside, can sometimes go for over $75 new. That means if you destroy every single barrel that can be destroyed in Half-Life 2, then you would have wasted probably more than $20,000 worth of just barrels. Crazy, right? Anyway, that's enough mind-blowing Half-Life 2 explosive barrel facts for one video. If you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe and consider becoming a channel member or donating to Shy Studios on a site like Ko-Fi or whatever else I'm on. And I'll be back next week with another video about oil barrels in Half-Life 2.